Hello there, everybody. Welcome back to Star Wars Lads for this week's fan Q&A. Hopefully you're all having a great day so far. It's November 25th. We're only a couple days from Thanksgiving, and we're ready to take all of your questions, comments, anything you would like to discuss with us in the chat. So make sure you fire in all your questions into our chat room. As you might have seen over the last few weeks, just to reiterate it but not go over it too much because we've talked about it the last two streams. We are changing our format around. We are streaming for about an hour, but it's fully focused on your guys' questions now. So make sure you keep firing in your questions into the chat. We are going first come, first serve, but we're taking two per person, and then we're going to be rotating back around after we've gotten to everybody at some point, and then we'll be coming back to the top to finish off getting everybody's questions. So make sure you fire in as many as you'd like. We will probably, if the majority of the chat is to be an indicator of what it will look like for the remainder of the stream, we'll most likely get to almost everybody. So if you have a question, if you'd like to ask us anything you want, send it into the chat room. We've had some fun questions the last few weeks, Star Wars related, non-Star Wars related. So make sure you're firing in your questions. We have a lot more people watching right now than have liked the stream. So make sure you like the stream. It really does help out our channel a lot, and we're not overemphasizing that. It really does help us out. So make sure you hit that like button. If you're watching on replay, make sure you comment your thoughts down below as well. We'll respond to your comments. And if you are just discovering us, make sure you subscribe and then join us every single Tuesday to discuss really anything you'd like to discuss in the world of Star Wars or anything you have to say. So fire in those questions. As always, super chats are going to be the number one way you're guaranteed a question on the stream. If you have if you would like to support the channel via super chat, send in your question with a super chat donation and we will answer your question immediately. You can also join our Patreon and YouTube membership programs, where if you're of a certain tier, you do get priority chat access. So make sure you keep an eye out for that and see if there's a tier that's right for you. You can check out our recent content. We've posted a lot of recent stuff, and we do have a tier list ranking all the Star Wars movie trailers coming out tomorrow. So make sure you keep an eye out on the channel for that. Hopefully, you're all having a great week so far. Let's dive into the questions right away. It starts this week with Brandon Tran, who says, "What do you think about the writer from Rebels, Henry Gilroy, saying that Sabine should have stayed as a Mandalorian and not become a Jedi?" This has been a story that's been going around the last week or so. I agree with him. I mean, we neither one of us really wanted Sabine to be a Jedi before the show came out. It looked like the show was teasing that a lot, Ahsoka, and I never thought it was a good idea. Having seen the show, I'm always up for changes for things, but I didn't think that the show particularly did a very good job exploring her journey. Sabine, kind of in the middle of the show, is relegated to the B character versus kind of being almost the leading character for the first few episodes, and then she comes back with a much bigger role in the last couple episodes. But the way the season was plotted, it felt like something that might need to play out over a couple seasons. But as we kind of know, season two was never a guarantee for Ahsoka. It feels like it was a plot point kind of rushed just to get to where Filoni wanted to go with the second season. So I agree with Henry Gilroy. I don't think that she should have ever become a Jedi. If you go back and can find our discussions during Ahsoka while it was coming out, I felt the same way. I just didn't think was needed for her arc. She was already plenty cool without being a Jedi. She already learned how to wield the dark saber without being a Jedi. Even in basically an entire arc of season 3 is about her learning to hone her skills without having the abilities that Ezra and Kanan have. So there's a lot of things that I think were built up in Rebels that really made it seem like there was no actual reason for her to become a Jedi. There's always time for Filoni and Sabine to win me back into being like, yeah, I'm glad they went this direction, and I'm open to that. But I'm with Henry Gilroy in general because I still, as of now, don't believe that that choice really should have been made. I don't think it really improved anything for the character.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I don't think it really improved the character. This is a show that also just had the strange self-imposed burden of, like, kinda doing, like, a backstory that we never see, a sort of semi-Rebel season 5 focus around Ahsoka and Sabine that we just don't get, right? Like, we don't know exactly how Ahsoka left Malachor, we don't know exactly when she shows up, other than that it's just possibly after Endor, maybe during Jakku, maybe even after that, like it's a show that I love for all its flaws because it really has a grand sense of adventure. It really does have a lot of the classic Star Wars isms. It gets into the weirder stuff that Filoni and Lucas were definitely exploring in Clone Wars, and a little bit more of the spirituality that is definitely inherently the foundation of Rebels. But its characters, other than Ahsoka, I don't think get the full service that they deserve, other than Ezra, but Ezra's not supposed to necessarily be suddenly, like, big and new. He should be familiar, should be almost like picking up after where we saw him when he made his jump, with the Purrgil at the end of the season 4 finale. Like, he can be different, sure, but there's also, a strong argument to say that if Sabine is gonna meet him, he wants to be as close to as she remembers, and as close to, like, what, it breeds familiarity, that sibling bond that they have, right? So, again, Iman Esfandi, I think has been the person who has had 0 complaints, honestly, for his portrayal. It really helps that he just straight up looks like the live action version of the character. I know that Mina Masood, I think, was always in the running and all the fan posters after his Aladdin appearance and everything, and I think he would have been pretty good too, but I'm very happy what Iman has delivered. And yet there's still things that I would say like, "Oh, I wanna see a little bit more hints of darkness," like a little bit more of, "Hey, we should maybe have him, like, really reckon with Sabine's choice of, like, trading places and then bringing Thrawn back into the conflict." Even if he has already been in once, doing that again to the galaxy, right? Without, like, checking in with Ezra, without seeing like, "Hey, like, what are the consequences? What has he learned? What has changed on Peridia with these grandmothers and all that," right? Like, there's a lot of things that are just questions about, like, what is this Thrawn that's gonna show up, right? And those are things that I think a season 2 has plenty of space to handle for that character, especially with, like, him being one of the more New Republic central focuses, it seems. But besides him, I'd say only, like, Ahsoka got, like, a proper good arc, and then there's a lot of people who still say, like, "Oh, she didn't get her development." I think she definitely changes by the end of episode 5, World Between Worlds. She stops kind of I know everyone, like, memes about her, like, crossing her arms and stuff like that, like, she's done that since the early days of animation. It's just, like, like, a nice little way to, like, make it seem natural, but, like, static, and that's kinda just carried over in the character. But she was, like, very stoic, she was very, like, not cold per se, but not really lively as we saw, especially towards the end of Clone Wars and, her appearances in Rebels where she has this nice balance of young and old, and what's been new and what, is still gonna be there from her in inception. That wasn't really truly there in her Mandalorian episode. There's not enough in the Book of Boba Fett episode, right? And this is her leading a show and burden her with that backstory that didn't necessarily make sense to just have without actually showing any of it, and then, like, get through the whole point of, like, we have to chase down and get rid of Thrawn and all this and that, and then we find out, "Oh, okay, World Between Worlds happens," and then she finally grows into his character, right? And I still think that was pretty good. I think she is a lot better in episode 6 through 8. I still want her to really deal with, like, Sabine's choice. She kinda lets her off pretty easily, honestly, but I'm hoping that's just part of, like, you know, like, saying, like, "Okay, that happened. We'll work through it now, what we can do there, what we can, possibly help Ezra with what we discover here." But I still want that to be conversations. And then Sabine herself, I think she's actually portrayed pretty well by Natasha. I think she really gets the characterization. I don't really get the argument people saying that, she doesn't have TSSR's spiciness and all that. I think she does, but she's also a character that's very clearly depressed at the beginning of the show. Like she's grown her hair out long. She's not really who she wants to be anymore. She's still the only one really holding out any hope for Ezra. Like Ahsoka's one of the key conflicts at the beginning of the series is that like, hey, we're here to, like, deal with Thrawn. Ezra's always the second priority, but that's not the thing for her. So I actually thought her motivation and all that stuff was actually pretty strong. I actually like when characters make big mistakes and swings. Again, I still want other characters to react more strongly, but I actually like that choice for her to go with Balin, almost like and not just be fully forced into their hand, but almost, like, willing to make that choice. But the question about, like, the whole plot line of her also in her backstory finding out that she actually has the Force, yeah, I don't know. I'm still conflicted about it. I've been describing it since 23 as, like, she's the equivalent of a Star Wars squib. That's kinda how I'd want her to be. Someone that is around the Force, someone that has some latent ability with the Force, but it should be very minor. And I do like that, and throughout the show, they really emphasize like, "Hey, you have the lowest midichlorian count possible to barely qualify as using the Force, being able to interact with the Force," right? So, I don't really mind that. I'd love for her to have her abilities kinda come and go. I think that's a pretty interesting thing where it's like moments of science kind of come into question, like, does she just not have enough midichlorians, or if she's injured, is she always at a weaker state and has to rely on her Mandalorian skills? And then is it moments where, like, the spirituality of the Force can come out? It's like, it doesn't matter if she's broken down or beaten, that's when, it's her true core, her true self or belief maybe powers through, and I love to see that handled a little bit more cleanly if they do keep it at that, like, level of she can't do all of that, right? Like I think her pulling the lightsaber after so many episodes of trying just to kill that zombie trooper, that's fine. It was almost just that the fact that like 5 minutes later she assists Ezra on the jump, and you could say she's got forced adrenaline or something going on there. But I was kind of hoping it'll be a little. It felt more like a 60-40 split of Ezra doing the jump and her doing like the final push. I kind of wish it was like Ezra made the jump, he was so close, and then Sabine just gets enough of a trickle to get him, like, barely holding on, right? I think that's how you should handle the character if you've been emphasizing, like, "Hey, like, you really just don't have a lot of ability," right? And then how that plays out throughout the story, throughout the plot beats, how she's like a wild card with the Force, I think would be very interesting, and you would still maintain, like, most of the Mandalorian aspect of her. Where does the attitude, where does the upbringing really help her? Where does it diminish from her? Where does things that Ahsoka teach her gonna really help her out? Where are some things that are just incongruent, right? There's a lot of things just about how it's played out over 8 episodes of a series that might have only been one season, as a guarantee. I think it had a little bit closer to a season 2 guarantee than most shows just because of, like, the nature of Filoni's position in, Star Wars, and now that he became the CCO after the show came out, I think he was always kinda gonna get at least a season 2, but, yeah, I mean, it was tough. There are things that I just don't love, and Henry Gilroy, I agree with his points. I don't believe he actually wrote on Ahsoka. I believe most of the writing was handled almost entirely by Filoni and, like, a new writer's room, so it does show there are things from, like, not having Clone Wars writers, not having Rebels writers that are already well versed with how Lucas and Filoni were writing these characters that feels kinda missing. Filoni really does seem very George Lucasian in the same way of, like, he kinda gets general big ideas and big stories for the world building across and just general arc in place, and these smaller, more intimate moments, dialogue, stuff like that, those aren't really his strong suits, especially making that leap to live action. So, like Liam said, it is still out for me as like, is it really worth it having made this choice? I'm thinking regardless by the end of season 2, it'll sit a lot better for me than it did in season 1. But yeah, it is a bit annoying. I can't say that I found it super sufficient, but I do find the cast very charming. I think everyone, including you know, the cast for Hera, Mary Elizabeth Winstead, like that was my biggest doubt, but they all look pretty good to me. Now, I hope that they tone down a little bit the context. That's really my biggest issue with the whole series. It does seem like a little too close to sticking to animation there, but Filoni has proven again and again that season twos of any show that he works on are usually much stronger. He's established all the rules he needs. He's established the foundations of the world. Then he has time to reflect, look back, and say, like, oh, that's not as good as it could have been. Or like, oh, this one really clicked in a way I didn't expect. I want to double down on it. I think we'll see that. I'm hoping that the runtimes are gonna be a little bit longer. This is definitely a show that I think you can get away with stuff like in caves and all that, and you don't really need to do too much CGI other than like the stuff with Anakin when you're on Peridia. I think it's just the fact that when we're hearing that, hey, this is gonna have a less of a budget than even season one did, I'm like, whoa, how does that make sense? But I'm hoping it's because they've already established so much of the assets that they need. The fact that they're moving to Pinewood, which has movie level filmmaking credentials from all the way from Star Wars' beginnings versus shooting on LA, shooting mostly on the volume, right? I think no matter what, this will look better. I think it'll be a little bit longer. And I think a lot of these issues that we have with Sabine, while they might not be fully resolved, I think they will land a lot better in season two.
Well, if you're just joining us, make sure you hit the like button. A lot more people watching right now than have liked our stream, and it really does help out our stream. So make sure you hit the like button. And we're just talking anything Star Wars, anything you want. Doesn't even have to be Star Wars. Fire it into the chat. Let us know what you think and what you would like to ask us this week on this week's live Q&A. If you would like to guarantee your question on the show tonight, make sure you send in a super chat as well. It really helps out our channel. Brandon's second question: thoughts on Rian Johnson's new Star Wars trilogy becoming canceled, according to some news articles. I believe the word that was used was effectively dead, was what Rian Johnson said. And that's a quote from him. It's not shocking at all because, I mean, it's been effectively dead since about 2018, the year after The Last Jedi came out. I mean, they have not addressed it. He is the only one who has addressed it since it was announced. And we forget that it was announced before The Last Jedi even came out. So it was a really long time ago, about this month, probably this week, 8 years ago, which is crazy to think about because I still remember where I was when I heard that announcement, going to class on the bus. But it was a trilogy that, even as somebody who's become less and less infatuated with The Last Jedi over the years, like to the point now where The Last Jedi's flaws stick out to me far more than its pros. But there's still plenty of things I really love about Rian Johnson as a filmmaker and what he does with some of the stuff in The Last Jedi. Even as somebody who doesn't really love The Last Jedi anymore, I still was always wanting to see what Rian Johnson would do with an original trilogy of movies, because I think Rian Johnson, as we've seen with pretty much everything else he's done, is a great filmmaker and he's made a lot of really good to great movies. He's a very talented person. I've gotten to meet him in real life and talk to him for a little while, and he's a very nice guy. And it's a shame that he never got to actually finalize his ideas. I think he probably seems like he's in a lot better place working on Knives Out and working with Netflix. I know he made a lot of money doing all that. And so I think he's perfectly happy. But the one thing he says and has continued to say, even though this story is now coming out like it's news, is that he's still open to returning to Star Wars. It's just that they are not, really returning his calls, for lack of a better word. He's not actively working on anything because they have no interest in actively working on it right now with him, but he would be willing to return. And I think Rian Johnson's the type of filmmaker, he likes to push the boundaries. He likes to get experimental. He likes to do things that subvert expectations. I mean, we see that. That's why the murder mystery genre is kind of perfect for him. I think, and I've always thought, he would be far better making a Star Wars movie that was his own, that was his own characters, his own original story, his own even unique time period. If they wanted to go the far future or the far past, do something that's Rian Johnson specific. And we talk a lot of now with Steven Soderbergh, right? The idea of these auteurs coming on to Star Wars. And I mean, you could say Rian Johnson was kind of the first one to join Star Wars since George Lucas, the first person with a clear cut, distinct style, somebody who doesn't necessarily blend as well into the studio system. And I think that's where Rian kind of struggled when it came to addressing things that, needed to be built on from 30 plus years of storytelling, addressing things that the fandom at large had expectations for, addressing things that maybe was a little bit safer for a studio. If you gave him his own original work, I think he would succeed wildly because everything else he's ever done has succeeded wildly. So I'm still on board for Ryan Johnson coming back in a capacity that's not with the main Skywalker saga. And but when it comes to your question, Brandon, I am not shocked at all, nor am I surprised, nor do I, frankly, really have much of of an emotional reaction to the idea that his trilogy's dead because really it's felt like this has been dead for going on 5 to 6, 7 years now. I mean, I really don't haven't felt that this is happening since probably about late 2018. I think that's the last time I felt like this was actually real.
Yeah, yeah, I think I held out hope until 2020, and then once the whole Disney Plus bubble kind of exploded, right, I was like, "Whoa, okay, like, this is the whole shift," and I mean, I think people forget. I mean, it's such a strange feeling to say, but I remember being at Celebration 22 with Liam, just walking around, seeing all the costumes for Mandalorian, upcoming Book of Boba Fett, and, like, you could just hear people be like, "This is, like these are the guys for Star Wars. These are the guys gonna lead our way." And now we're living in a future, in a present day where it's like, people are like, "Will Favreau, a notable filmmaker who is very good at making big budget films using great new technology, be able to pull off anything with Mandalorian Grogu," right? Like, it's Star Wars has been very fickle since the sequel trilogy. So, it's not to say that, like, I don't think Ryan Johnson couldn't have done it, but, yeah, it does seem like for everyone's sake, it's a bit better that he takes a step away. I mean, there were rumors too that, like, recently that were coming out that, like, oh, he was offered to direct episode 9, and that were there was there from, like, since 2017, but he himself has, like, denied that multiple times. He's like, "That was never the idea." Like, he might have just been a consultant with a bigger role than, like, maybe he had on The Force Awakens with JJ, but yeah, I mean, for me personally, I've always actually kinda stuck around with The Last Jedi. It is a challenging movie for me. I'm not gonna, say that, like, I watch it and I'm like, "Wow, that was such a breeze to watch." It's really not. It's really not for me. But I am really a fan of what they do with Luke, especially once you get past, like, the little mopiness of it and you actually get into, like, a little bit more of what he's feeling about the characterization, and you get to really see Hamill's performance stretch out. I really like that. Do I think you still need to, like, give us 30 years to flesh out that choice? Definitely. I'm not gonna deny that we've been saying on this channel, if you're gonna make a big swing like that, the payoff won't happen until you make an investment, and so far, we're in this weird probably because of Disney Plus, this weird purgatory of, like, are we gonna have a recast? Are we gonna have animation? Are we just gonna deep fake all the original trilogy characters for the rest of the time, right? It's not exactly like the same situation as, like, the Darth Vader voice of James Earl Jones, being kinda encoded. That was always changed into some sort of effect that can always become, like, a sort of audio mess for another performer, and there's plenty of other performers that we see, like, with the Jedi Fallen Order Survivor games that do very good Darth Vaders, but, like, the characters that need to have payoff to where they are at the start of the sequel trilogy, yeah, it's strangely missing, and I mean, JJ, for better or worse, doesn't really make anything severe in the change of the characterizations. Brian does with Luke, right? He definitely does, but I think when it's all said and done, it will be the one that has the best payoff, right? You're already seeing so much of the payoff pretty much completed by 2015, 2016, other than, like, the addition of, like, Bloodline for Leia, and so it's like, "Hey, she's always gonna be the North Star. She's always the one who's gonna always be fighting for what's right. She's gonna step up to the plate." There isn't necessarily much about her personal life that we know quite yet with, Ben and Han, but where she is, how she's set up in the sequels, yeah, JJ doesn't make it too complicated there. Han, you're like, "Alright, he's a scoundrel, let him do scoundrel things." But Luke, it's like, well, he's got that weight and heft to him, right? So those there are things there that just need to be improved on, need to be fleshed out. I know recently he was talking about, like, "Oh, my whole reasoning behind how I approach Finn was that Growing up, I was in a very conservative, very strict religious household, and I moved away from that, and I just had a lot of trouble stepping away from that, and that's what I wrote Finn as. Personally, I didn't really see that immediately watching it afterwards. I can kinda see that a little bit more, like, kinda has, DJ on one shoulder about committing to the cause or not versus Rose being, like, the one who's, like, full sending and being like, "You have to do what's right." I can see it work a little bit better, but still not the cleanest execution there, and it's definitely disappointing for people who saw, Finn basically as a co-lead with Rey. So him kind of having a secondary storyline that's a little bit more about an ideology as opposed to a personal growth of a stormtrooper, which was like a really big sell, right? Yeah, it is frustrating. But that being said, like, this is Ryan Johnson. He's made so many good movies. He's made Looper. I He's had a controversial Breaking Bad episode. The Fly is the one that you ask any Breaking Bad fan on, and you're gonna have the most polarized opinions about it. I personally love it as a pocket episode, but I can absolutely see people be like, "What the hell are you be watching 40 minutes about Walter running around in the lab obsessed with a fly?" Right? Yeah, I absolutely get it. And if you look up the discourse online around Ryan, like 2012, 2013, when he was announced to come back for the final season, people were like, "No, keep him away. He, like, did the worst thing ever," and all that. And then he came back and directed Ozymandias, which is considered arguably the best ever episode of TV, right? It's just the guy's got talent seeping out of him, and I think he is a truly passionate fan of Star Wars, and he's in a really healthy pace considering all the vitriol that was, like, thrown his way after The Last Jedi. But I think it's for best that this trilogy doesn't happen, and we also aren't even putting into consideration that there was also a lot of rumors with, like, the Benioff and Weiss films that were supposed to be, like, a series of 5 were supposed to have some interconnectivity with his. Can you imagine how much mess that would have been if they actually got to a point where they had, like, characters crossing over or some interesting things happening at the same time in the galaxy? People would have just jumped on the hate train, and, Benioff and Weiss arguably so, deserve a lot more about, hatred towards him, and I don't think anyone deserves it, but a lot more criticism for sure because of how they handled the end of Game of Thrones. They had every single option to, leave the show, extend it to 10 episodes, 10 seasons, new showrunner, everything, and they're the ones who accelerated to then, even if they had the bones provided by George R.R. Martin, even if George R.R. Martin hasn't finished the books, right? Ryan made a swing with something in a franchise that doesn't really have any books or anything else to fall back on. It is the story that he wanted to make for better or worse. Yeah, and, I'm still gonna be a positive fan about it, but I am okay with him not being back. He's in a great place, obviously, with his Netflix releases of Glass Onion after how Knives Out was such a huge success. This third film is getting crazy good reviews from all the screenings that they're happening early on all the different festivals it's been shown at, and this could be something that might be even touching Knives Out, which is insane. Like for a murder mystery genre that's been dead for decades, he has single-handedly revived it and made it really good. And there's been big budget, like Death on the Nile and all these adaptations of Agatha Christie stories that have just not had that same cultural relevance. So he's already proven himself in a really interesting way. And he also had that one TV show on Peacock, Poker Face. They ended on season 2. It got canceled. And he wants to pitch it to other networks, just replacing Natasha Lyonne with Peter Dinklage and like not even have it be a different character, just straight up as a recast with Dinklage. This is a guy who after everything with The Last Jedi, is still willing to take huge swings, is still willing to just have fun with what he's doing. I'm always gonna appreciate that for him. And I still want him back in Star Wars, but maybe like a solo film or like an episode of a TV show where he can kind of just work within someone else's story and structure and really bring out his direction, which I think has always been a highlight. I don't think anyone criticizing The Last Jedi really is going to look at the majority of the direction in that film and be like, oh, it's disgusting and nasty. No, I think visually, he has a great hold with his team on the cinematography side. It is very, very distinctive of a look. I think he brings out some great performances. It's just a matter of the writing. I don't think he necessarily hit as much as he was hoping to. If you give him something where it's just a one spin-off, right, or give him an episode in a show where there's an overarching showrunner and he's kinda working to bring out that vision, I think his reputation improves amongst the Star Wars fandom. So, I think right now he's still a little bit hated, but once you get a little bit more of this, like, sequel content start pumping out there, once we get this post-sequel era really kicked off with Starfighter, who knows? We might even see, like, a different referendum for The Rise of Skywalker, The Last Jedi, and the sequels as a whole, which I've noticed at least, started changing a lot in the last 6 to 8 months.
Batasai comes in with a heated question. Don't know if I'm going to read the whole thing, but we'll answer it still. Specifically about a lot of your guys' favorite YouTubers, Star Wars Theory, who we've talked about on the channel before, and specifically in regards to Acolyte. Um, let's see. I'm reading through your question right now. Ultimately, yes, can things change for the better? I mean, I don't think. Listen, like I think somebody like Star Wars Theory oftentimes is summarily dismissed by Disney, which is this might not be popular to say with you, Batasai. Part of the issue overall is because who are like we have fans who dismiss everything. We have fans who love everything. In today's world, everything's so polarized that creators don't listen to criticism anymore. They listen to the subsection of the fandom who likes their stuff, and they double down on what they want to do based on what people who like their stuff say, and they don't listen to any of the criticism of kind of the moderate channels like ours who actually give legit criticism. And that you don't have to like as film people ourselves. I mean, I've gone through the process of writing scripts and hearing what people thought about them. I've gone through the process of making stuff and hearing what people thought about it. I mean, we literally go through it every week making content for you guys and hearing what you guys think about it. There's a healthy relationship there between the people who care about what we do and the people who don't, and it's pretty easy to tell. But a lot of times because, what we're hearing on our YouTube channel with criticism is amplified 100-fold for people making Star Wars TV and film, they decide to just tune everything that's slightly negative out. And so I think the real issue in today's Star Wars or just in general movie culture is that creators don't listen to fans because they tune everything out that's not positive. And same with the studios. Studios have seemingly even less pulse on the fandom because they decide, well, there's a lot of crazy people out there, or we don't agree with certain people's takes on certain things. We're not going to just listen to anything they have to say. But even sometimes in the most ridiculous criticism, sometimes you can find a little grain of truth. And I think there's a lot of soul searching that needs to be done on both sides, both the fandom side and the filmmaking side to get the best product, because I think the divide right now is more evident than ever. And one of the main reasons the divide is so evident is because you have people who treat YouTube or other platforms like it's their soapbox to say whatever they want without giving a lot of times fully legit criticism. And then you have other people who don't care about the criticism and just love everything because we should be happy all the time. There's a happy medium in between. And I try to bring that all the time on my thoughts because I think Star Wars has been, outside of the odd hit like Andor, I've been more down on Star Wars the last few years than I feel like I've been in my life, because it's just gone through the same kind of issues over and over again. It's frustrating, especially as somebody who basically gets to talk about Star Wars every week with a fairly decent sized platform. It's frustrating to point these things out as a person who actually has and enjoyment of this stuff and wants to see it get better, actively wants to see it get better. You still point out the errors and the flaws and like the things you want to see improve, and then continually ignore it. So I get frustrated with the business side as that type of fan, but I also get frustrated with the fans who cause my voice to get suffocated and my criticisms to get suffocated because they're critical on every little thing. And so there is a big divide and there is a lot of stuff that needs to be band-aided. Um, but yeah, when it specifically comes to certain things like the hunt for Ben Solo, from what we've heard, it's not that fans online tanked it. It was that they decided that they didn't like the script enough. Basically, Iger and Bergman decided they didn't like the script enough and the reasoning for Ben coming back enough to greenlight the movie. It wasn't specifically fan vitriol. Would there have been fan vitriol? Sure, but it hasn't really stopped them from making certain decisions in the past. I know Disney has come out and actively said, "Hey, we want to get more people back on board. We're going to do the best we can to make the highest quality product we can." But that doesn't mean ignoring entire parts of your Star Wars universe, right? They're going to do things they feel are best with the highest quality products that they feel are best. And to me, that's a win already because I mean, before, as we know, in the streaming era, it was just content, content, content. Who cares if it's good? Now it's back to okay, let's at least try to have some type of standard, um, and that's I think overall good for the product. But it does mean some things are going to be canceled. But yeah, I mean, I understand your frustration, Batasai. I personally don't watch really any other Star Wars YouTube channels. I try to keep my thoughts my own and not listen to what other people have to say, and just make up what I want to say based on my experiences with each product. But I know from what other people have said, and I know the whole thing with the acolyte too, and the like Kiadi Mundi thing. I mean, I had to push back on the Kiadi Mundi thing because I literally made a video the day, like 5 days before the Acolyte released, and Kiadi Mundi never had a birth year. That's why I included him in my possible canon characters who could be in the Acolyte video, because was um, he was not he didn't have a lifespan in canon. So I said maybe Syrians, they're already extending the lifespans of Miri Allens. Maybe they'll extend the lifespans of Syrians based on what we've seen them do in canon. And I ended up being right. But I did acknowledge that in Legends he had a birthday. So like just going back around, I get the frustration because there are a lot of things that a lot of people on YouTube use and double down, and it makes no sense to a lot of us more moderate fans. But um, the people who want to run with it, run with it. But and then Matthew says, "Why bring back the Acolyte? Worst of the Star Wars franchise." Hey, I'm with you, Matthew. I really don't like the Acolyte, so I'm not here to defend the Acolyte in any way, shape, or form. I'm really glad it got canceled, and I never wanted to see it anymore. But there are people who wanted to like the Acolyte and do like the Acolyte, and that's also fair. Those are all fair points too. Um, but when it comes to what Batasai is saying, I'm not focusing on the Acolyte as much because I didn't think it was a good show, and I feel like I have a fairly good faith take on the Acolyte, just purely as somebody who watches a lot of film and TV. Not, I don't really have any agenda for Star Wars. I just want to see Star Wars be good. But when it comes to Hunt for Ben Solo, I don't think fans are specifically impacting that type of thing. But I think fans do impact what we are seeing in the future more than ever, obviously, because the box office is so pivotal to film nowadays. So, anyway, that's a long winded response of like going in on just the fact that fan culture is so divided with not with even within itself, which it already is. I mean, we have so many different factions of fan culture, which is why, trying to stay in the middle, trying to actually have good faith takes rather than just loving everything or hating everything is very difficult to make your business grow on YouTube. It's why we firmly believe it's one of the reasons why we're not a bigger channel in this space. But it also, I feel, is the most true to who we are and I am, and that's why it will remain that way. But it's also the main reason I don't watch other people's content because a lot of people I just can't stand watching too happy or too sad content, like, or too mad content. Like I like genuine criticism, so I appreciate all your guys' voices who are in our comment section, constantly bringing us your pros and your cons for everything. But I don't know. We'll see. Hopefully, we'll see things change. If the products, I've always said, if the product improves, if like Star Wars is, it doesn't even have to be Andor level, but if Star Wars is just consistently good, right? Just consistently 3 out of 5, 3.5 out of 5, 4 out of 5, which is basically what Marvel did for a decade. If it's just consistently solid stuff, the overall conversation will change because it's inevitable that people are going to end up, general audiences will end up liking those things or the majority of those things. I mean, on our polls and stuff, I can't tell you how many people we see saying like, Solo was a pretty good movie. And like, I'm not a huge Solo fan, but I'm glad they enjoyed it. And there's certain things that come back around if they're just solid. And I do think we're in for that eventually. It will get better over time.
Yeah, like Liam said, it's a bit of a loaded question. Um, Let me see how I can break this down. Uh, well, that aside, I've never been too explicit about it on the channel, but I'm not a fan of Star Wars Theory. I just there's a lot of things I don't like about him. Um, I'm not gonna criticize, person without knowing him, but I'm gonna criticize what I've seen in his videos. I think he's gone away from actually making theory videos a long, long time ago, and he's just now made videos that, yeah, I'm sure he's making a little bit of extra money on, but it's not really what someone who, claims himself to be someone defending George Lucas, self-appointed title, of course, like George Lucas Star Wars, is actually doing anything with George Lucas Star Wars, right? I know recently he got an invite, I believe, to uh, be there at the opening at some point of the George Lucas museum that's coming out next year in LA. So, you know, it also kind of shows that Disney and Star Wars as a brand is not really connected to George Lucas and what he's doing with his museum. He has maybe his own insights. Maybe he just is like, this is one of the biggest Star Wars channels. I'd like them to be there, right? Like, and this is it's maybe he can kind of spin it as like, oh my god, George Lucas. Like I think quite literally his videos like George Lucas invited me uh to his museum or whatever. But this is George Lucas. He would barely glance at the EU. He'd be like, "Oh yeah, have fun," or maybe put in this designer. Like, don't really do that. Like, this is a guy who's always had Star Wars in his own specific way. So for someone else to be like, "I'm gonna defend that," I don't know. I mean, this is a guy who doesn't need defending. You look at Episode 1 documentaries, you see Light and Magic and all that. There are people within ILM, within Lucasfilm, who are always like very cautious about what George was doing. They're like, it might have gone too far. It might have been done a little bit like that. But he's like, I'm here to like push cinema forward. I'm here to always keep it fresh and new and interesting. I'm here to take what inspired me and, you know, dress it up again for a new audience. Right. Like I just finished watching Light and Magic season 2. Like the way that he approached Jar Jar, right, was like this is a Buster Keaton style character. But everyone around him, the animators, right, even Ahmad Best were like, I'm not really sure. Like, it feels great on set, but like it feels like a great revolution is happening here, but is this really like what's gonna work here? And the reception was not what he expected. But you know what he said? He's like, no, look at every single review. Nobody ever says that they didn't believe Jar Jar was a real character. Right. If anything, they doubled down on believing in him because they found him so annoying. They just found him like maybe stereotypical stuff like that. Right. So that level of depth at thinking, right? I don't see that personally on his channel, right? I don't think that's really what he's doing these days. I liked some of his early theories. He definitely pumped out a lot of big videos when Star Wars YouTube was first coming out, right? But what I've seen lately, yeah, I'm not a fan. Like, I mean, one of his biggest controversies these days is the Andor, like bolts and screws at that point, anything he was saying, right? I don't care about his politics. I don't care about his stance on stars. The fact that he was like, "Oh, we can't have screws and stars." I'm like, "All right, what are we doing? Super gluing everything together?" Like, this is a franchise that took old 1940s weapons, added a couple scopes on all of them, put a little bit of black paint on it, and it's like, "Here you go. Here's Han Solo's blaster pistol." Right? It's like, yeah, yeah, like, this is a franchise that is rooted in its influences and dresses it up again. Star Wars is the ultimate remix, right? From that remix, it birthed something new, right? And just, I don't know. It was just shocking to me hearing that and him doubling down on it. Like, I was like, and then the fact that he's like, oh, Andor season two, like it's even worse than season one for me, even though it's got like a better pace. He didn't like even bother to, you know, go break down the episodes like he's done for like Mandalorian and stuff. So that's one thing I really don't like about any like content creator. If you're not willing to actually like invest some time in the show, especially with TV shows, which are so easy just to react to and not actually do like reviews like we do or predictions, just watch and react along with your audience. That really gets on my nerves. I'm like, "That's come on, man. You're not how can you say anything about the show from what you're reading on Wikipedia and all this and that?" And, a lot of his original theory videos and, like, his lore videos were very much sourced from Wikipedia. It's a great resource, but you can't tell me that, what I read about Darkness Crisis, for example, is the same as reading the 3 books. No, it's a very different thing, right? So much of, like, even people who are, like, big on canon over EU, they'll point out stuff and details like that, but it's because they never actually went and read those books. So I always have a bit of a problem with that. I get if it's been a long time since you read or watched something, right? But at least engage with the material. And I've not really appreciated that from his channel. I'm also just not a big fan of AI being used in creative spaces. It should be an additive. It should not be a replacement, right? So seeing like some of his like AI not even like AI video, but like AI like stop like very small frame movement adaptation of Heir to the Empire and all that, and saying like, "Oh, this is art," but then saying like stuff like Andor isn't Star Wars and all that. I really can't appreciate that. I really have to strongly disagree with that mentality. So yeah, I'm very much not a big fan of the guy, but fact of the matter is he does have the biggest Star Wars channel. Sometimes it comes down to just grinding super hard when things are new, right? And he definitely did. And I'll say he definitely earned it back then, but I don't think that's the same channel that he's running now anymore. I just don't really find it very fun. And even some of the people he associates with are not even like people who are like, "Oh, I like Star Wars, I like Lord of the Rings." There's just people who are like who existed during a period of time where YouTube was just really like letting anything fly. So I'm really not a fan of that. I feel like these days, anytime I check his channel, it's more of him just selling his like you know theory sabers more than anything else. And I'm like, all right, at least just commit to that, right? If that's what you're gonna be now, you commit to that. Your conventions, just do that. Like, give your perspective as a fan. That's fine, but don't don't engage with the material half-heartedly and then say like, "Oh, I watched everything that was needed or done this and that." Right? He had a huge surge when like Acolyte came out, for example, right? I think he actually gave Acolyte a bit of a chance. I do recall him having some watch throughs, and he didn't like it, right? But I can at least respect that because he actually watched it with his fans. Not I can't respect someone who doesn't even bother to watch Andor season 2, right? And I'm like, "Ah, okay, I don't have to agree with what you're saying with Acolyte, but you watched it. You are making your opinion on it. Even if it was predisposed, sure, you watched it." The Kiadi Mundi thing with him, really was not a fan of that, especially because there were people who were coming on our live streams back then being like, complaining and raging about that, and Liam was just like, "Hey guys, I made a video about this. Like, this is not just something." Like he changed the whole narrative around that. That's one thing I really dislike. He kind of weaponized the fact that Wikipedia can be changed by anybody, and he's like, "Look, they changed the date and all this and that," but people who worked on Wikipedia were like, "No, we can provide screenshots. We can provide updates. This is not true. This is something that we were changing as the episode was airing, and then realized that is kind of being like flip flopped around. That's not really something that's being very clear to people that this is a new thing, right?" But you can see people like Liam who made videos about like, characters who could show up. There wasn't a date for that, and that was one of his biggest things, like, "Oh, they're changing everything about it." Do I personally agree with the idea of, like, almost every near human kinda having an extended, like, lifespan? Not really, right? I think it took away a lot from, like, the stuff I really love about Vernestra in the High Republic books, how she's portrayed in Acolyte. I think she's pretty good in that final episode, but it's very, like, unclear and unfocused what her role is in that story as, like, a weird middle management Jedi, which she's never at all like. She's, like, the entire opposite of that in the High Republic books, right? And that opinion comes from me and Liam being super excited for the Acolyte because we were reading the High Republic books, engaging with it. You can check our channel. We've got everything. The only things we really didn't cover are some of like the insider stories and like the toddler adaptations with Buryaga as like the main focus. We are people who engage with these characters, engage with the stories, and still had problems with Acolyte. For me, Acolyte has just remained like a C minus D plus for me. It's not anything that I really love. I think they could have spent way more on the story. I think the budget and the sets really don't match. There's clear that there were some, mistakes in the shooting for sure. There was rumors that it was a difficult set as well that Lucasfilm has kind of kept pretty quiet about it. I'm not gonna blame any of the actors on how they marketed the show. You of course want to be positive, especially when it is a show that got racially targeted in the same way Finn when he showed up in that very first teaser for uh The Force Awakens. People are like, "Oh, stormtroopers can't be black." Like stuff like that was happening to the cast. I feel horrible for them. It happened in the sequels. It happened in the prequels of it. Ahmed. It happened with Jake Lloyd and his portrayal. I really do not like that in our fandom. I think we've perpetrated that and spreading to other fandoms, unfortunately, and it continuing, right, and kind of growing and changing in different ways. Anytime it re-enters Star Wars, just really breaks my heart because it's like we of every fandom should know better than that, right? So yeah, I'm not a fan of that. I'm not a fan of channels like Theory that kind of push stuff like that too. I don't think he pushed it towards any specific person. I can respect that, but the Kiadi Mundi stuff and all that, man, I was really frustrated. Like this is a show that you let it fail if it has to. Let it fail on its own merits, right? That's the only way Lucasfilm actually will learn something from it. I'm still very happy it took big swings and risks because I still think that this is material that can then be, adapted into something in animation, something that can feed into, a Lucino book about Chimera or something, or anything that leads into more of a proper Plagueis story, right? Liam and I have always mostly agreed on most things Star Wars, but Acolyte we were very much in disagreement about. I love the lightsaber dueling. That's probably the one thing that Liam likes about that show, right? And there's other things I really enjoyed, but I'm like, the execution should have been a little bit there. Runtime should have been there. Shouldn't have had these episodes that were super short, cut to the bone. Felt like Robert Rodriguez episodes of Book of Boba Fett in their length at times. When you could have really spread it out, you could spread out the flashbacks, the mystery behind it, instead of just jumbo sized episodes for those with kid actors that weren't as strong as some of the other ones that we've seen in Star Wars, and especially with today's standard with kid actors. I'm criticizing elements of the show as it came out because I engaged with it. I spoke with Liam about it. I spoke with all you guys on our stream, and I still put it as like, yeah, C minus D. I think it could have done better with a proper second season just to finish and wrap up its elements. It's frustrating knowing like the whole Vernestic Chimera thing, everything that's going on with the Virgins, like that stuff. May and Osha, how are they like, you know, are they really just like a soul split in two? Is that what the dark magic refers to? It was a show that definitely fell on polarized lines, right? And it fell on people who were super positive about the Star Wars under Disney and people who just absolutely loathe everything about Star Wars. And then there are people like me and Liam who like were different about it, but kind of still were more in the middle of the opinions, right? At the end of the day, what says more about the show than something like The Last Jedi is The Last Jedi still has conversations and discussions and sources that have people be like, I'm at least enjoyed this, or like, this has kind of faded for me a little bit, but I don't disagree or agree with it anymore like I did back in 2017. Acolyte has its diehards. I'm not going to deny that, but it has faded entirely from the consciousness, right? It should not have faded with this marketing. It should not have been, you know, this forgotten really in less than a year, pretty much. When Skeleton Crew was delayed for a whole year, came out at the end of the year, and basically has that same level of reception, right? And we both love Skeleton Crew a lot more, but we're also quite happy that it was just a one season and done. It's not really much more you can do with that, concept other than maybe having the kids show up in other stories. But yeah, I get what you're saying, Batasai, about Star Wars theory. I get what you're saying about some of these bad fate takes and how it can shape and affect the fandom. I disagree about, like Liam said, about the Ben Solo stuff. I don't think that was really fandom or related because we didn't know. We straight up didn't know that this was happening. It's like it was ripped away from us the very moment it was introduced to us, right? This was all stuff that was happening with Soderbergh, driven by him and Adam Driver himself, an actor that we speculated was so big now that he didn't really need the franchise. He didn't really want the franchise in the same way as like someone like a John Boyega or Daisy Ridley might. And yet he was the one driving the force behind it, right? There's definitely Disney politics in play with Iger and who his replacement is going to be. What is he how's he going to set up the next wave of Disney as a whole after him, right? Yeah, no, and I know what you're saying for Hunt for meant that execs say no because they listen to you. I don't think they do. I really don't think they did when it comes to this one, because this one was very much driven by an auteur filmmaker, very much driven by the best handled character, or not a handled character, the best performance for sure of the sequels, the most popular character of the sequels. I have to really strongly disagree with you there, Batasai. And very much respect everything that you bring to this channel here, but as someone who is definitely on board with Hunt for Ben Solo happening in some shape or form, I don't think Bob Iger is like, oh, I got some sources and speculation that Star Wars theory that really likes that doesn't really like this idea of happening. If anything, I actually checked his channel out. He was one of the people who was saying I really wanted to see this at least played out, right? So if even someone who has had such a negative impact on the fandom is saying that, I think it's a bit of a different case, right? This was not like Ray's New Jedi Order where we've been like flip flopping between, different writers, between like different concepts, right? Of like an older Ray in her 90s versus bringing back Daisy Ridley. Is she gonna have other characters? Is she being developed in this project along with other projects, or is this going to be the intro to it? Are we getting an episode 10 to 12? Like that's a lot more of a bigger mess. This was presented with a green-lit script, right? Which means Lucasfilm truly loved it. At the end of the day, Bob Iger is not like saying, I want this script to happen, right? He's just approving, he's giving his, final verdict on like, hey, should this go ahead or not? This is the only script ever in Lucasfilm's history for Star Wars that has been greenlit and then executives said no, right? And I think it's just a matter of like the wariness around the sequels. Like, are we ready for the post sequel era and jumping into it? And with the timeline of how it's being developed, it would have come out possibly even before Starfighter. Starfighter, when it was first like really rumored and all that with Sean Levy's involvement, was just another one of those projects. For it to be coming out in 2027, already be shooting and all that, it seems to have gone fast tracked a little bit. All right, with like the success Sean Levy's had with Stranger Things, with Deadpool and Wolverine and all that, with him being a much safer director in comparison to Soderbergh, who is an auteur, and auteurs are notorious for wanting their vision to not be compromised, right? This is someone who Levy, for as good of a director as I think he is, he's going to play by the rules a little bit more than someone like a Soderbergh, right? There's a lot of different things you have to consider just from the filmmaking side of the business as opposed to the online fandom. At the end of the day, they're going to take that input. Like Liam said, they should take more of it, good or bad, instead of just choosing specifically to focus on the good sometimes or choosing specifically haphazardly focusing on the bad. But Hunt for Ben Solo specifically, no. It really was just something that for some reason Bergman, Iger just did not want to have happen here. But even the people who are on diametrically opposed sides of the fandom are united for this. Raylos, sequel haters, EU fanatics, everybody has said, like, I want to see this idea played out, right? Because it is the best parts of the sequels, and it would bring that character to a different level instead of just kind of doing a sort of quasi Vader redemption story when he had a lot more potential and still does because of the Force diet.
The and I think Batasai, I think you kind of might misunderstand what I'm saying too about like I don't watch Star Wars Theory. I don't watch these guys. I have no idea what he's saying. So that's my first thing too with this. But also, I think that Disney isn't listening to anybody's opinions. That's my problem. That's why I said you're probably not gonna like what I say about that is they're not listening to Star Wars Theory and saying, "We're not gonna make this." They're not listening to Star Wars Lads and saying, "We're not gonna make this." They're not listening to anybody. They're only listening to the general amount of people who liked something. And the number one thing they listen to is when it comes to film, box office, when it comes to streaming, watch hours. It's those two things. They listen to those things above all else. Acolyte failed to meet that. So therefore, it is something they move on from. They don't cancel it just because people don't like it. They cancel it because it failed to meet their watch hour requirements that they have, their measurements. So that's where we go with with that. I mean, I think in general, you shouldn't make art based on what other people tell you. If you feel strongly about a decision, and I felt this way too in the past, whether it be YouTube videos, script I've written, film I've made. Sometimes people say something in a criticism, and you as a creator sit there and go, "Well, that was pretty dumb. I'm not going to listen to that." And when we all feel that way. But there are a handful of times where you might feel that way, and then you take a step back and go, you know what? I actually kind of see where they were coming from because I, as the creator of this, know this answer, but the audience who has no idea about what I'm thinking in my head, they just have the script to go off of, or the film to go off of, or the YouTube video to go off of. They don't know what I'm thinking. That's really beneficial. And that's the number one thing they should use us for is not for us to tell them how to make a movie, not for us to tell them what they should write their script about. They should use us to say, what were we trying to say? And why did that not translate to the audience? And that's what they don't do anymore. You used to see them do that. You used to see them listen. They don't listen anymore. Nobody listens to what they only listen to the money. They don't listen to anything else. So that's where by having somebody who's very divisive, you create this toxic feeling of like, well, why should I listen to these people? They're just going to hate everything already. Like you're saying, a bad faith takes on maybe Kenobi, bad faith takes on the Acolyte. They turn off to that immediately, which is a major flaw in our relationship as audience and studio, as audience and creators, because they go, well, these people already have an agenda. We're not going to listen to them. And as a creator, you're already defensive about putting your work out because you're sharing a bit of yourself, whether it's a lot of money in it or no money in it. There are people, whether even if something's super corporate, there are people who pour years of their lives into creating a product, and they want to be affirmed on their own feelings about their work. They don't want to be summarily dismissed prior to people even seeing their work. So I can understand how frustrating that would be as a creator. But ultimately, it's kind of comes down to just having people maybe sift through that stuff, and that's why I honestly feel like the studios should have, like, a low paid person, or maybe even high paid, considering I think it's really important to their overall business structure, but somebody who just literally it's their job to kinda sift through the pulse of the fandom and just say, "Hey, these are the 20 reasons why more, you know, reasonable people don't like the Acolyte, and here's 20 reasons why they also like the Acolyte." And kind of create this kind of pie chart. Don't just say, well, any criticism of the Acolyte is because they have a bad relationship with Star Wars already and they're gonna not like it. Because that's what the studios I feel like do. I mean, obviously I'm not in there, I don't know. They might talk about Star Wars YouTube channels, but I think really they just say, well, these people don't like us already, so why would we listen to what they have to say? Um, Sometimes there's value in that. I've learned it firsthand. There's value all the time in hearing what other people think about your stuff, and you just have to have a thick enough skin to say, well, when you disagree with something, well, that was stupid, or I don't agree. So, and then you move on. And you double down on what you believe, but sometimes you can find holes in what you believe by figuring out, hey, maybe I wasn't approaching it from a way that my audience can understand. Maybe I was approaching it from a way that only I understood. That's valuable, and I don't feel like we do that anymore. So thanks for the question. I think it's good discussion to always have. Appreciate your thoughts on it as well, and always appreciate hearing from you.
Yeah,
How does
I just wanna
how does
add one more thing. It's complicated too. Like, I really think Liam has, like, what he's saying about, like, this role, it should happen more. Like, listening to people just actually engaging with each other and talking about this stuff as opposed to, like, the people who are trying to make statements about it. That is the way to really, sift through a lot of this. But it's also complicated because, we're in this era now that a lot of studios are more owned straight up by like people who own data centers and people who are looking at analytics as opposed to listening to their creatives. And studios were never great about that in the past, right? But they still were usually run by people who like worked in the business. Now, so much of like the big studios now, like right now, we're trying to see if Paramount gets, not Paramount, Warner Brothers gets bought up by Paramount, who's owned by Ellison, who owns Oracle, right? What does an Oracle executive know about Star Wars or, a Halo franchise or something like that, right? Like it's horrible to think about, but that's how our studios have changed so drastically. And it's lined up with this whole big wave of the 2010s of very IP driven filmmaking where creatives have kind of fallen off, right? Like now we're starting to see a little bit more of a recovery, but for a long time, it wasn't about the story and like writers. It wasn't about the director and their, catalog. It wasn't about the Hollywood star and like what the roles they can blend into. It was the character of this franchise. And we're not getting away from that too, right? Like at the end of the day, franchises are getting older and older. We're seeing even cartoons that we grew up with, right? When cartoons used to be a little bit more about, episode of the week, just jump in whenever you want. Now we're seeing stuff like Adventure Time continues to get spin-offs, right? Something like a regular show is getting a continuation. Gumball got a continuation after like 6 years of being off, right? Like people are going to older franchises, giving it a good shot, and once it does well, they're like, well, now we've revived a franchise for like another like 10, 15 years. Like franchises aren't dying anymore. That was a thing before in print. That was a thing before in early cartoons and stuff. Star Wars is probably the biggest reason why franchises aren't dying because it's arguably like the modern myth of the world, right? Especially when it comes to America's filmmaking, it is America's modern myth, its biggest contribution. And myth shouldn't just end in today's day and age. But how does that line up with people with making decisions based on data and analytics that aren't themselves filmmakers? How does that line up with them looking up online when we know that so much of our internet, more than 85% nowadays, is automated by bots, regardless if it's good or bad, being people and actors behind it, right? It's complicated now. And I can understand why they shut themselves down, but they kind of have to almost reinvest into like speaking with people and finding out who are the real people, who are people who are engaging with this. Conventions are great. I love them, and you're gonna find some really interesting conversations, but for the most part, they're gonna be positive. But
yeah.
there are places to find the fandom that is gonna be critical, that still love the stuff that are, a little bit more positive about it, some are a little bit more negative about it. But it's not gonna be through executives that, have no interest in an IP other than to just milk it for more content, and that's what hard. So, maybe I have to disagree with Liam on one thing. I don't think it's a low-paying job. I think it's a whole division of high-paying people who can sift through just how complicated it is now to keep aging franchises fresh and unique while still catering to at least what people are, like, feeling about the franchise. It's gonna be hard, and it's gonna be something I think can only really be fixed and improved on, less so by like, simply saying, "Oh, we're gonna make a great commitment to making great stories," but also to be like, and we're also gonna invest in engaging with our audiences again, and not just rely on, what we're seeing online on influencers and all that. They have to really put a lot of money towards like connecting with the fandoms these days. It's not just an experience for us to like be happy with. If you want these franchises to go past 100 years, you're gonna have to, continuously update and repair it just like you would a city and its infrastructure.
And what I mean by a low paying job as well is like that's the type of grunt work you used to have an intern do. You
Yeah.
have if you have a team of people, you can have those intern type people sifting through the content and the higher ups making a strategy, right? Like it's a whole process. And again, AI. bots don't buy tickets. So you've got to appeal to the people. And so we've got to see how this changes. And Matasize says, how does this audience and studio relationship change? I mean, what I'm talking about more so is, I mean, it's a system wide thing. Sonic brings up good points in the fact that, I mean, we've seen pretty much every type of company own a movie studio at some point in the last 10 years, whether it be phone companies or business strategy companies to other types of multimedia companies. Everything and everyone and everything has tried to get into the media game. I mean, tech companies, Apple, Amazon. But what it boils down to above all else is, yes, you have to deal with the politics of your studio and whatever the demands are of the people you work for. But as creators, I think that's the soul of this, right? Sometimes when you are a creator, you want to double down on yourself. You want to say, I know best. Do you? Because sometimes you don't have a way, you can be brilliant, but if you can't connect to the people who you want to think you are brilliant, then you're not brilliant. So that's the thing I think a lot of people in today's world when it comes to creators do is they turn off everybody. They just say, I know best. As creators, you can look at what other people are saying. And again, you can disagree with it or you can agree with it, or you can find pieces of it you can agree with. But you should be able to have that thick enough skin to be able to, and that confidence in yourself to bring in what other people say and add it to you to make you a better whole. That's what I feel is like pulling in what other people say. You can dismiss it, you can add it, or you can take pieces of it, but you don't have to. What we do is sometimes live in a world today where creators are like, I'm just dismissing everything that's negative because obviously those people don't know what I'm talking about. It's like maybe they do. You just haven't looked at it from that perspective. And so I think fundamentally it all starts with creator. If you approach a script with that philosophy, I think you're a better filmmaker. If you approach your film, your storyboards, the shot selection, the way you build your product from the ground up with that perspective, then you'll be a better filmmaker. There will be things pulling you back. The studio will often be that, but it's from concept. And I think in today a lot of creators don't go into concept with that in mind. They don't go into concept with audience in mind as much as they go into concept with how can I show everybody how smart I am. And sometimes that can be where the disconnect happens is like you try to connect that bridge. Art is only effective if other people feel your feelings through it. And if if you can't get that build that bridge, then ultimately you won't be able to find that path. So I don't know. It's an interesting conversation across the board. And I think it's one that's often worth having, but there's, of course, a lot of nuance to it. And the industry's changed so much over the last 20 years, but I mean, the last 5, it's been crazy. So we'll see how it continues to evolve. But thank you so much for that question. We went a long time on that question, so we'll continue our stream for a little longer just to get a few more people again. But we are probably going to wrap up around the hour and a half mark. So fire in your last questions. If you have a question you're dying to get on the stream tonight, super chat guarantees you get on the stream. So make sure you send that in. It really does help out our channel. We have more people watching right now than have liked the stream. So do us a favor, hit that like button. We really appreciate you and your support and all the people who join us every single week. We can't do what we do without you guys. So thanks for joining. Scrolling down, we have Mr. Oval who says, who would win in a fight between the Mandalorian and Darth Vader? I would take Darth Vader in that one, Cynic. I think you probably would too.
I don't think the Mando makes it to the room, so I think he's already
Yeah,
killed, just like through a video screen, like Vader does throughout Empire Strikes Back.
chokes him. Yeah. And this one's pretty cool. We got the Goldman 25 saying, just came across your book collection video. I love watching these kinds of videos. I'm a bit behind with my collection. Hey, well, good luck building out your collection. And the Goldman has a pretty awesome channel too. I've watched some of your videos as well, and I really, really like your work. So thank you for joining us tonight, and hope you continue with your Star Wars book collection. Let us know if you need any help or tips on where to find some stuff with that. Matthew Ware says, trying to make it through Young Jedi Adventures after watching the Star Wars chronological video. hard to get through, but I'm gonna do it. My 11-year-old son's legal name is Luke Skywalker, and he has a classmate named Anakin. Wow, what are the odds of that? That's awesome. I love that for your for both your son and your son's friend. Yeah, as for Young Jedi Adventures, again, as I said in that chronological video, if you watch the other parts, it's like Young Jedi Adventures it's meant for kids. It's meant for little kids. So it is gonna be really tough to do it. I would imagine. Well, your son's 11, you said, so he might be too old for for Young Jedi Adventures 2. But I would imagine it's a lot more fun to watch it with your kids than it is to watch by yourself. So good luck with that. But yeah, that should be in terms of at least content level the hardest thing for you to get through. There will be things that are worse. Next, you have to go with the acolyte. So it sounds like you've already seen it, but yeah. So if you're working your way through, I mean, good luck. But that is one that even I have a hard time binging. It's like one episode at a time if I can.
Yeah, it's I've seen the show. I bought one of my cousins some Legos just to see if we could get him into the show a little bit. Um, yeah, I like the little teddy bear guy. He's pretty fun. I
Yeah,
like that the story
Nubs.
coincides with everything in the High Republic. I think his name's like Neb or something.
Nubs.
Nubs, right? So um, that's cool. I know he's a big seller at Galaxy's Edge, his, like, backpacks and, like, plushies and all that. So, there's definitely is an audience for it, but like Liam said, it's not even, like, kids, it's, like, toddlers and younger. It's, like, the very first entry point for that age range that we've never really had in Star Wars, and I'm honestly pretty surprised at how many episodes they've been putting out, like, the interest behind it. Like, they're on their season 3, I think is gonna come out end of this year or something, so there is an audience, at least of people putting it on their TV and just playing through or something like that, you know? It's not probably not a a series that you have to really pay attention to the heavy details for, right? But it's, it's I think it's interesting, I think it's cool. I'm pretty happy from what I've seen and its connections with the High Republic, but I can see it being a little tough to get through, and I'm assuming you're a much older man, probably hard to relate to a kid that's as sad as it is to say, probably was born after COVID, right? And what that world is like versus, whatever year you were born in, right? Like that it's just mind-boggling to me that there are kids born in COVID that like are entering kindergarten and stuff like that. It's just, yeah, just wild.
Time flies. Okay, so I'm gonna scroll it back up because I think we've gotten to everybody, and then go to Brandon's last question, and we'll go back down real quick. And Brandon asked, "Have you seen Super Mario Galaxy's movie trailer, and what did you think about it so far?" Yeah, I thought it was really fun. I can't wait to see it. Only disappointment is that for a while it was heavily rumored that Wario and Waluigi were going to be the main villains of Mario 2, and I doubt it now. It looks like Bowser Jr. is the main villain, which is pretty cool, kind of combining a little bit of Mario Sunshine and Mario Galaxy. I think it'll be a lot of fun. I think it's our gateway to getting, even more stuff in the kind of Nintendo world popping up through Mario. But I'm excited. I enjoyed Mario 1. It was simple. It was a lot of nostalgia, but I had a lot of fun with it, and I've enjoyed it every time I've watched it. I think this is going to be bigger, better, a little less formulaic. And Mario Galaxy is my favorite all-time Mario game, Mario Galaxy 1. So very excited to see what they have in store and like what connections they make. And maybe, just maybe, if they do actually bring in Wario and Waluigi, like Space Wario and Space Waluigi, I'm down for that. We didn't get them in Mario Galaxy, so I really want to see Waluigi's like my favorite Mario character. I love that character, so I can't wait to see if those characters ever come in. Maybe Mario 3. Hopefully, we get it a little faster than we got Mario 2.
Yeah, I saw the trailer. I'm a much bigger fan of Rosalina than the Peach that we saw in the Mario movie. Thought she was alright, but it just felt like all your biggest hits of, like, the last Switch generation, Wii generation of, like, the popularity of Nintendo exploding around these characters kinda put all together. So in a way, right, that was better for like Luigi. I think he's become a lot more of an established character in the last like 15 years than before. But in other ways, it's like, well, the classic foundational pieces of like 80s and 90s, um, 80s and 90s Mario just doesn't really seem 100% there at times in that film. Kind of just like Liam said, very simplistic at points. So that is frustrating, I will say, but I have seen enough so far that I like about the Super Mario Galaxy trailer. I liked how they're using Bowser so far. I think Bowser was definitely a highlight, but it's also just because Jack Black has gone from like that funny guy that you see in movies to like he's just a walking meme actor, right? Like that's what he plays in every film now. It's over the top meme, and it's working. It really is working, and I think Bowser's one of his better performances. Like Steve, like from Minecraft, as forgettable as it gets, and if he had some fun lines here and there, but there's nothing to that, right? At least Bowser, I'm like, he's doing an incredible song at the end there. He can kind of play a little bit more with the voice, and Bowser's not, as established lore wise, I guess, in some ways as Steve is with how crazy Minecraft fans are with story mode and everything. So, and you know, the difference being that he's an animated character versus Jack Black and a very tight shirt that doesn't really fit him for the memes of it all, right? So I'm looking forward to it. I'm hoping that they do Rosalina justice. I wouldn't be surprised if they combine elements of Galaxy 2 into like the main story of Galaxy. It'd be pretty interesting if we get like Space Wario, Space Waluigi, but I can almost see that more as like characters that pop in as like a tease for becoming the ultimate villains or their counterparts becoming the ultimate villains in the third film. Third act appearance and disappearance sort of guys.
Yeah, I feel like they're gonna be in credit scene at best. But here's to hoping. I mean, I think the most exciting thing, Brandon, about it being Mario Galaxy to me is that I feel like just any time now we might actually get Mario Galaxy 3, which is just so awesome. When we got Mario Galaxy 1 and 2 remastered, we're getting Mario Galaxy the movie. Mario Galaxy is just so great. I want Mario Galaxy 3. Switch has motion controls. We might as well give it to us. It's such a great game. There are very few bad Mario games, but Galaxy is like probably in my 5 to 10 favorite video games ever. I just love Mario Galaxy so much. So can't wait to see it. Can't wait for what's in store from the gaming side because Mario's 30th anniversary this year was, or 40th anniversary, excuse me, was kind of underwhelming. So we'll see. We'll see if they're saving it for next year. Hopefully next year if we get that, and then Pokemon 30th anniversary. Looking for a pretty good year for Nintendo. Hopefully a kind of a bounce back year after. I mean, this year was pretty good, but like it was they haven't had as much support for Switch 2 as I think a lot of us were hoping. All right, we're gonna wrap up here pretty soon. We're about an hour and 23 minutes, so we'll try to run through these last few in the next like 5 minutes or so, and then our show's gonna wrap up. But thank you guys for joining us again. Last few questions, send them in. If you have anything you're dying to get on the show, super chat will be your way to guarantee that. Scrolling back down, we got, I believe we stopped at Matthew Ware says Mandalorian season 3 was worst of the show, in my opinion. Yeah, I share that opinion. Badasai says, okay, so we were talking about that was the same conversation we were having before. Then Matthew says, trying not to get my hopes up that Starfighter will be really good as I've been let down by most of the recent films. I wonder if I'm in the small. Okay, that's a different question. I'm with you, Matthew. Just in that, like, I tried to not get my hopes up for anything when it comes to Star Wars right now, which is a sad place to be, and it's why I think Mandalorian's going to struggle to be a huge hit. But if it's good, I think it'll at least try to make its money back. Because I think people all have that kind of same wary expectation. It wasn't like, even though to a lot of people the prequels were something that they wanted to forget, when Force Awakens came out, there was like this renewed optimism about pushing into a new direction. when we had our last massive gap between films. This time it's like, okay, we're not pushing in any real new directions. It's just kind of new filmmakers, and it's not the same Star Wars we know. It's new characters and all that. So I think people are looking at everything with very mild excitement until we are proven a few times over that things will be really good. And I think recent track records for the box office have kind of shown that. You've seen in franchises that have fallen off, steady climbs, steady improvement, even if nothing's exploded, steady improvement across the board for a lot of things as products get more and more consistently good. And so I'm hoping that that's the case with Star Wars, that Mandalorian's pretty good, Starfighter's great, see the box office start to climb. And then by whatever comes out after Starfighter, you, me, all of us can be as excited as we were originally for a lot of these Star Wars movies when they were coming out, even every year back in the late 2010s.
Yeah, yeah, consistency is gonna matter, like Liam has really harped on in this stream. Like that's really all you need to get things really exploding, that when they are like truly like big swings, right? Like when we say, and I don't really want to go back to the whole conversation about how do we have the fandom and creators like work. It's too deep, it's too multifaceted for you and us to handle. But when we say like consistency matters, it's not because it's like, oh, it'll just be box office returns. It's when like one creator comes out with something like a Hunt for Ben Solo or something, and it's like, I want to take this swing. All right. Well, one, you're like, well, I think we've already built up a little bit of goodwill that we can take a little bit more of a gamble this time. And two, if it hits, right, because you've already built such a strong foundation, you've shown like you've got a commitment to making everything at least decent. Bam! Suddenly people are gonna be like, "Oh my god, like, I am willing to take this chance on this auteur film from Star Wars, from Soderbergh," and if it was, still in production, it came out and was a big hit after, like, let's say Mandalorian, Grogu, and Starfighter were both, like, decently well received, I wouldn't be surprised if that breaks out because it's like, wow, there's a little bit of a track record here, since Andor, things have been looking pretty steadily uphill, right? Just like how the MCU, Brave New World was a salvage job and they made it okay enough, right? But then Thunderbolts, well received, not a huge box office, but well received for CD level characters, right? And then they didn't get a huge breakout with Fantastic Four, but it was a very steady growth here. And they're spending a lot of time on Doomsday and not just its marketing, but like a whole year in post production and everything, really spreading out how they're doing the releases. Daredevil, even with the changes that were made, once they kind of made sure that the Netflix canon was canon again with that show, it became a much better show, even with its ups and downs in the middle of it, right? They have made a steady climb with the MCU. I think that strategy proves that, like, with something that has way more of a linear timeline to play with, that you can see massive improvements. With Star Wars, with its flexibility, simply just getting a couple projects, even if they're not in the same era, just strung together that are good, it'll allow you to take those bigger swings. And I think you'll see the fans be like, "Yeah, I'm ready for this," even if I'm not sure what's going to happen. And if they respond well to it, prime for explosion.
Absolutely. Completely agree with pretty much everything you said. And it's why I think there was still people able to get to that excitement level even after the prequels, when the conversation was so negative about the prequels, was the Clone Wars card to rebuild a little bit of that brand trust. And then going into Disney's Star Wars, when they were really doubling down on like, we're going to do everything the old school way, people were able to build that trust and loyalty right off the bat, and that excitement, because it just felt like they were going to take those swings again. And now, considering it's still under the same umbrella, I wonder if this would have been a little bit more like what sequels under George might have been, if that conversation was still like, yo, don't know what George Lucas is going to do. I still think those would have made a ton of money because people would have still gone seen anything that says 7, 8, 9. But overall, I think that like tempered excitement would have kind of been there. I think people got over that because it felt like they were going in such a direction that was exactly like people wanted it to be at the time. Um, so we'll see. We'll see. There, everything's going to be new. Everything's going to be different. So we'll see what they're able to use to connect to the audience with. Um, one last thing I saw about a side down below. I mean, we're not going to get to everybody's question. Unfortunately, this will probably be the last thing. But I asked if we have letterbox accounts. if we could share them with everybody. Yeah, at the end we maybe can drop our links, and I have a letterbox account that I update very frequently. It's like my favorite place to easily my favorite social media if you count that as a social media.
Yeah, yeah, I'm a bit behind on my reviews, unfortunately, so I will drop it, but don't be shocked that there are stuff that's been missing since September.
All right, everybody. Well, thank you so much for joining us this week. Again, if you have any questions that weren't answered on tonight's show, make sure you save them for next Tuesday. We'll be back live again with you all. Hopefully, you're all having a great week. Have a great Thanksgiving if you're in the United States. Hopefully, you have a great holiday week. We hope you enjoy spending time with your family. We're very thankful for all of you joining us and for supporting our channel. Closing in on another year of Star Wars Lads, and we appreciate you all being a part of the journey with us. Again, make sure you hit the like button if you haven't, and subscribe to the channel for more content just like this. Stay tuned. Tomorrow is our canon, or not our canon authors. We already did that last year. Our Star Wars trailers tier list, which was voted on by our Patreon and YouTube membership program members. So if you guys have a Patreon or YouTube membership program interest, make sure you check that out. For the lowest possible tier, you can actually vote in our topic polls for the tier list. So make sure you check that out and check out our programs and see if there's one that's right for you. Keep an eye out on the channel for shorts as always. And then, of course, the polls that are twice a day, every single day. Thank you so much for watching the stream, everybody. And we will see you all next time.